Good afternoon. It is February 15th, and we will be discussing Chariots of Fire.
Well, welcome everybody. It's nice to see you. And Vanessa noticed my tie-in to the Olympics by including this movie around this time. I don't know that we mentioned that the last two movies I put in February because of African American Heritage Month. So I thought that those were nice tie-ins too. But today we're looking at Chariots of Fire from 1981. It actually got 7 Oscar nominations in its year, 1981, won 4 of them, including, let's say, one for Best Score by Vangelis, and one for Costume and for Screenplay, and it won Best Picture. It was also nominated for Best Director and Best Supporting Actor. That was Ian Holm, who plays Sam Musabini, was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and was nominated for Best Editing as well. This was not an expected outcome at the Academy Awards that year. There were a couple of other movies that were much more the favorites, I'd say. And a couple of them you might remember. On Golden Pond was one, which won some awards as well. But perhaps best remembered from 1981 is Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I guess conceivably in some ways we could put into a real Jewish classics movie as well in its search for the Ark of the Covenant. But this one's a little more direct than that one. But it was a big surprise when this small movie from England won. And so it was considered to be a small, relatively low budget film. It was directed by a guy named Hugh Hudson, who up until this time had been a documentary filmmaker. He hadn't made a feature film before this. It was his first narrative film. And he made a few after, but none that sort of rose to the level of this one as well. So he was born in 1936 in London. And then the writer is a guy named Colin Welland, who, by the way, Hugh Hudson, born in 1936, he's still kicking around today. Colin Welland, who wrote the screenplay, was both an actor and a writer. And he actually won a BAFTA award as an actor, which is the British equivalent of the Oscars. He also played a pivotal role in the movie Straw Dogs by Sam Peckinpah, an American movie, a very disturbing film that some of you might remember. But so that's the fellow who wrote this screenplay. He was born in Liverpool in 1934. He won the Oscar for Best Screenplay, and somewhat famously in his acceptance speech said, "The British are coming." So didn't quite pan out that way afterwards, but he was predicting a string of British Oscar wins over the next few years. So he wrote a couple of other movies. He wrote one about apartheid in South Africa that some of you might have seen, called A Dry White Season, that starred Donald Sutherland, kind of a legal drama with a pretty good screenplay. So neither the director nor the writer of Chariots of Fire are Jewish. A lot of what the screenwriter based the screenplay on, and you can hear it a little bit in the movie itself, is that we actually have letters written by the character of Aubrey Montague and Eric Liddell. And so those letters are, at least in substance, some of the things that they actually wrote to their families as they were preparing for this moment. So on the other hand, a lot of the rest of this true story has some elements that are fictionalized. I mean, apparently the Sybil that the character of Harold Abrams marries is not the Sybil that he actually married. and she never appeared in The Mikado, though she was a singer in, So I mean, I would say some license, some dramatic license, but not. It doesn't dramatically depart from the actual events of the 1924 Olympics, so not dramatically. So let's say the one person involved with this who of note who was Jewish is the producer. The producer is a guy named David Putnam, who, again, up until this point, had produced more documentaries than movies. He was born to a Jewish family in London in 1941, and among his documentaries, he produced a couple of movies about World War II, Hitler's Rise to Power, and a movie called Swastika, and then went on to work with some of the great directors, British, really, I guess, British directors primarily. But he was the producer for, he worked with the director Ken Russell. Some of you may remember he produced his movies Mahler, biofilm about Mahler, and a rather crazy biographical film about Franz Liszt called Listomania. He also worked with the director Alan Parker, who directed the movie Midnight Express, which you may remember had John Hurt was in it. And one of the actors who plays a very small part in this, well, a pretty small part, he plays Jackson Schultz, the movie Brad Davis. Does not have much in the way of dialogue in the movie, but he's an important character in a sense, this movie, but he starred in Midnight Express. He also worked with Ridley Scott on Ridley Scott's first movie, which was called The Duelists. And he also produced some other movies that you may know, Local Hero, which was a beautiful small Irish film, and The Killing Fields about Cambodia, which won a couple of Oscars, I believe, including a Best Supporting Actress Oscar. Well, no, what was it? I guess she was playing a man. I think she was nominated in the Best Supporting Actress category. What was her name? Linda Hunt, I think. So David Putnam was the driving force of getting this movie made, and so perhaps felt some connection to the Harold Abrahams character and wanted to see this done. In terms of the actors, some may be familiar to you. I mean, some of the smallest parts are some of the most well-known actors in the movie. Brad Davis, who I mentioned from Midnight Express, who plays Jackson Schultz, and also appeared in the TV movies Sybil and Roots in small parts. Dennis Christopher, you may remember from Breaking Away, which was shortly before this, a movie about bicycle racing, which Americans preparing to run in the Tour de France. It's a very sweet movie. He was continued to be around. Yeah, so there's Brad Davis. He died young, by the way. He died of AIDS. He was born in 1949, died in 1991. He was an AIDS activist towards the end of his life. And his wife, Susan Bluestein, who's Jewish, has continued to be an important AIDS activist since his death. So Dennis Christopher was born in 1955 in Philadelphia. As I said, you may remember him best for Breaking Away, but he's been in a number of things over the years, including a small part in Django Unchained, the Quentin Tarantino movie. And the HBO, I think, produced Western Deadwood, which a lot of people consider to be the best television series ever. So those are some familiar faces. Of course, John Gielgud plays a small part, the Master of Trinity at Cambridge, born in 1904 in London. He won the Oscar this year for Best Supporting Actress, but not Best Supporting Actor, but not for this movie. He plays the butler in the movie Arthur, the same year, 1981. But I would argue that perhaps sometimes Oscar voters are influenced by the whole milieu of what an actor's been doing. So to appear in two movies in the same year, even though this is a very small part in Chariots of Fire, and a much larger one in Arthur, it still gave the voters for the Oscars an opportunity to see him in two different kinds of film in the same year, doing two relatively different kinds of performances. But I'm, we could go on and on about John Gielgud's career. I mean, he's part of that generation. I mean, the generation of British actors like, of course, Sir Laurence Olivier and folks like that. So, in the kind of that first generation, born in London in 1904, he died in 2000. He had been nominated for an Oscar once before Arthur. He was nominated for his role in Beckett, which was back in 1964. So certainly one of the great actors on stage and screen of the 20th century. Sir Ian Holm, he was not yet knighted when he appears in this movie, but he was in 1989, 8 years later, made knight. He plays Sam Misubini, and he was born in 1931 in Essex, England. Just died last year, 2 years ago, I guess now, 2020. And probably is best known for his work in the recent adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, where he plays Bilbo Baggins. This was his only Oscar nomination. He did actually win the Tony back in 1967, appearing on Broadway in a Harold Pinter play, The Homecoming. So again, very distinguished actor, and probably sort of the next generation in a way, after the John Gielgud and that generation. I mean, he's maybe even after the generation of folks like Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole. He's sort of in that next group of great British actors in film. So those are some folks in the minor roles. The actress, really practically the only actress in the movie, right, is Alice Krieg, who was not well known when she took this role, but the same year she appeared in a movie called Ghost Story. A lot of people remember her from that. In 1996, she was in Star Trek, first what was it called? First Conquest, I think.
First Contact.
First Contact. And I think perhaps that's in the middle of that row of pictures of her as the Borg Queen in Star Trek. So among Trekkies, she's an important character in the lore of Star Trek. So, but has been a character actress for many years, but this was her screen debut, actually, as Sybil Gordon here in the movie. So that leaves us with the lesser known stars of the movie, who all went on to do some other things. Nicholas Farrow plays Aubrey Montague, who was born in 1955 in Essex in England. And he, in a remake of The Diary of Anne Frank, played a role in that as Albert Dussel. Ian Charleson plays Eric Liddell. Here, he was born in 1949, died in 1990. Tragically, he also died of AIDS, sorry to say, 1990. Very young man. He did appear the very next year after Chariots of Fire. He appeared in Gandhi in 1982. So, but this is certainly his biggest and best remembered role, I think. I think that's fair to say. As it is for Ben Cross, who played Harold Abrams. He was born in 1947, and sadly he died a couple of years ago as well, in 2020. I believe it was some kind of cancer. So he certainly had a few other roles, but nothing, I think, to the level of this. I think he was in the remake of Ben-Hur a few years ago, if memory serves. So, but so these three young, relatively unknown actors who went on to other roles, but this is really their, their best remembered work, I think. So, as I said, it did win Best Picture, and so it goes down in the history. There aren't that many movies, and just not yet 100 years of Best Pictures. So I guess on some level you could call those the 100 best pictures of all time. So maybe not, but certainly this is a wonderful production to have been a part of. And it does sound like there was a lot of interesting collaboration in it. And so, for instance, the writer was asked the question, the writer and the director, about the biblical quote that that the character Eric Liddell reads near the end of the movie, when he's giving a big sermon, I guess, to talk about not running on Sunday and what that means to him. And he reads from the prophet Isaiah, which is an interesting choice in and of itself. But he reads from the prophet Isaiah, and according to the screenwriter, that wasn't in the screenplay. In preparation for the role, Ian Charleson apparently read the entire Bible, and he suggested that this would be the thing that Eric Liddell would preach about, these words from Isaiah. So it does suggest that there was a kind of an openness and collaboration about it. In terms of craft, I want to go back to the fact that the director, Hugh Hudson, was a director of documentaries, and that this was his first narrative film. And there are moments in this movie where I think quite deliberately the movie wants you to think that you're watching something like a documentary, that the camera is just observing these men preparing to run, or even at the times that they speak in public. I mean, it's a very, the technique is sort of a documentary style technique, almost as if you just turned on the camera and watched the runners run. And I'd say, I think, it may happen a few times during the movie, but one of the places where it's particularly striking, I think, is in both the scene where Harold Abrams loses a race to Eric Liddell, and then in the Olympics when he wins a race, the movie shows that last yard over and over again. And that's very much a documentary style technique, right? It works very well in the narrative film, but that idea of showing it from all different angles as someone's chest hits the tape, right? It's very much a documentary style to do that. So I think that's quite interesting. Where he opens it up into a more narrative kind of style is with the use of sound while that's going over and over, while there might be conversation in the background and some other things. So it kind of, he uses these documentary techniques in a way to get us into the head of the character. And that's, I think, a fascinating use of what he knew to get to a whole new level in this new work of his, right? So Should mention the title itself. Where does Chariots of Fire come from? Why is that the title of this movie? It's sort of two things that I'd mention. One is that Chariot of Fire is used in a poem by William Blake. And that poem is adapted into a hymn that's sung in the Church of England, in particular called Jerusalem. And we hear that song sung by the boys' choir at the end of the movie. But in turn, it comes from the Bible itself. So primarily the story of Elijah the prophet, who ascends to heaven in a fire, in a chariot of fire, right? So that's the reference that the title makes, and I believe is. Yeah, so you can see why this is a Church of England, hymn, right? I mean, I don't think anybody sings it in America. Maybe in the Anglican Church in America, possibly. But you see there, bring me my chariot of fire, right? So it's where the title comes from. So it's very connected to England in a sense by this hymn, but also very connected to Judaism, right? Through the story of Elijah, and Elijah, who appears in the book of 2 Kings in the Bible, and rises to heaven. I would say one of the things about Elijah, and I think you know this from our tradition, is that Elijah doesn't die according to tradition, right? He is arguably, there are two characters in the Bible that don't die, and Elijah is the much more important of the two. The other is a character in the genealogy between Adam and Noah. We find a character named Enoch, and Enoch doesn't die. But Elijah, instead of dying, ascends in this fiery chariot, which is why that whole tradition about Elijah that we know perhaps from Havdalah and from Passover, and even at Brit Milah, at circumcision ceremonies, we always invoke the prophet Elijah. Because Elijah didn't die, Elijah is the one who will come back and tell us when the Messiah will come. So I think less about the messianism in that story, but more about the eternal life part of it, that this movie makes the argument that these young men, these athletes, are never to be forgotten, right? That their deeds, in a certain sense, at the 1924 Olympics make them immortal in a way. So now I will say that when this movie came out in 1981, I think those guys from 1924 might largely have been forgotten, but the movie makes a case for them as being a really important and significant thing. And I'd say, the movie does a really good job of setting the scene for that, in a sense of how badly the people of England felt the need of something like this. Right, we see a few scenes early in the movie where we see veterans of World War I, and there's a lot of talk about those who died in World War I. The speech, the freshman speech, right? You see the wall with the names of, seems like hundreds of names of the students who went to fight in World War I and died there, and so that the dean's speech is essentially about how it's now your job to take over from them, right? To to start a new, to live out the promise, the hope of their promise, right? That was cut off by the war. So there's the movie does a really good job, I think, of setting the scene of what it was like. Those scenes take place 5 years before the Olympics, right at the end of the war, 1919. So and of course the character of Harold Abrahams himself fought was part of the war effort. The other runners were not. I mean, one was a missionary in China at the time of World War I, and the other was an aristocrat who didn't have to go to war. So, certainly Harold Abrams probably didn't have to go to war either. I mean, it was, he volunteered. The son of a banker, certainly it's the same as it's always been, that those with some wealth and influence could have gotten out of this. So he deliberately chose. It's part of his quest, I'd say. And that too is one of the most interesting things in this movie, is juxtaposing the lives of these three runners. I mean, what the difference between being an aristocrat born to leadership in England, that's the character of Aubrey Montague, who feels so comfortable talking to the future king of England, where others don't feel that same kind of ability and connection, right? And of course, juxtaposing that with Eric Liddell, a missionary, the son of a missionary, and the devout Christian whose devotion extends to Sunday is not a day for playing rugby. Sunday, he says early in the movie, right? And later on, of course, it's not a day for running an Olympic heat. So, and then juxtapose the two of them with Harold Abrams and the deep sort of dissatisfaction that he feels of being singled out as a Jew, no matter what he does. And on the one hand, he's assimilated, not living the life of an Orthodox Jew for sure, but he's also not allowed to forget who he is, even if he wanted. This is the case with. We can go all the way back to someone like Benjamin Disraeli, right, who ascended to the role of prime minister, but even though he was baptized a Christian and was not a practicing Jew, is still remembered not only by Jews, but by others as being a Jew, right? So it's, no matter what Harold Abrams does, he won't be allowed to forget who he is. And so we have these three characters who are vastly different in many ways, and what brings them together is running and speed. You can, when you talk about assimilation and the Abrams character, I mean, this movie begins and ends with his funeral, and it's taking place in a church, right? I would say that as a real life character, as well as in the character of the movie, he was not committed to religion in any way. In fact, what he really wanted was that religion shouldn't be a restriction in his life. It shouldn't keep him from, taking the roles that he wanted to take in life. And after 1924, I think the movie at the end says that he became an esteemed kind of the dean of British athletics, and that's true. But he also, in 1936, when the Olympic Games were being held in Nazi Germany, he argued against boycotting those games. He actually attended those games in 1936, and he was a broadcaster for the British Broadcasting Service at the 1936 Olympic Games. But he also in his life took in Jewish refugee children from Nazi-occupied Europe. So an interesting character who nominally, I think at some point in his life may have actually converted to Christianity in the same way that Disraeli did, perhaps, but was not any more committed to Christianity than he was to Judaism. So if it was a tool that would get him to where he wanted to go, he was willing to use that tool. But in some sense, he was never allowed to forget his Jewishness, and he did, as they say in the eulogy in the movie, he took them on one by one, right, and tried to make a difference for himself and for other people like him. I think there's a lovely moment when Sam Musabini, near the end, after Abrams has won the gold medal, and the two of them are sitting and having a drink together, and Ian Holm has a lovely little monologue there about you did it for us, right? So all those people who don't quite get to move with the sort of ease of the aristocrats in England, right? Those who are always considered to be foreigners, no matter what they do, right? Sam Musabini feels that they have struck a blow for all immigrants that day, for all non-landed gentry of Britain. So, by the way, you might even know one other producer that I should mention. There's an executive producer of this movie, in addition to the producer David Putnam, the Jewish guy. Did anyone notice who the other one is? Yeah, Alice has a hand up. Yeah.
Dodi Fayed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
of course, his name was not well known, and really not well known until after the death of Princess Diana.
Exactly.
But kind of interesting to see his name there, and perhaps felt some of that same kind of, it's not the same for immigrants there, right? And this is perhaps a bit more British than it is American. I mean, we certainly have our issues with people who don't like immigrants and want to, so we see that strain in people we know, and of course in politics here, but there's still not quite the same sense of aristocracy in the United States as there is in Britain, probably even to this day, right? So it was, what was going on in 1924, maybe it's not as pronounced in 2021, but 22. But it's certainly still there. No matter what you do, you can't change what class you're in. So, so the movie begins with a funeral, right? So, and people speaking at the funeral of Harold Abrams. The first line, I believe, is "Let us now praise famous men," which is from Hebrew, right? Not from the Bible, actually, but from a book that Jews call the Wisdom of Ben Sira. In Christian Bibles, it appears in the Apocrypha, and it's called Ecclesiasticus, not to be confused with Ecclesiastes, but it's written originally in Hebrew in the 2nd century BCE. Which was too late to get into the Bible, essentially. So it appears in Jewish writing outside of the Bible, including in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can find a copy of the Wisdom of Ben Sira. So this funeral is taking place in a church, but the language that's being used is from Hebrew. Right, so there to honor the legend of Harold Abrams. So, and we get from there to that music, that theme that Vangelis wrote, which is won the Oscar and beautifully suited, I think, to the film. It doesn't. I would say it's not pervasive in the movie. I actually in thinking back to this movie before I went back and watched it again, I thought that Vangelis theme was all over it, and it's really not. I mean, it's there's other music. There, of course, there's some Gilbert and Sullivan that gets thrown in from time to time, and there's which I think, by the way, almost all of that is sort of chosen for its symbolic value as well, right? The different things that they sing at different points in the movie, and a couple of hymns that are sung, including Jerusalem at the end. But that Vangelis theme comes in here as you see the team running on the beach in shallow water, right? It's quite beautiful, right? And the sort of very washed out kind of color it's used there, which again it makes it look like an old some sort of old photos, right? Rather than something new, right? So
I had the same memory. Here it
now,
is. I thought it was in through the whole movie because I remembered it so vividly.
right, which is a really good sign of a great score in a certain sense, right? Not that it's so obtrusive, but that it's so memorably attached to the images themselves that it becomes imprinted in your mind together, you know. So of course it sold a lot of records actually back in 1981. So so it's you know, and so the movie bounces back and forth in time from the present day of the funeral to the preparation for the Olympics in 1924 to going back to the beginning of their time at Cambridge, right? And so you know, so primarily we're in 1919, 1924 in the time of the funeral, but perhaps a little bit. So we see them arriving at Keyes College, and you know, right from the start, the very differences. You know, the guy who comes with his golf clubs and his tennis racket versus Harold, who just helps him carry those things, right? And really just to get him out of the way, not so much to be nice or friendly, I don't think. Right? So, but we see the encounter that Abrams has with the you know, checking in at the college, right? And you know, he's rather prickly with him and says, I ceased to be called laddie when I went to war, right? And I ask you to remember that. And when he leaves the room, the guy says, who, by the way, went on to quite a career too. I've forgotten his name, but he's in the Harry Potter movies and a whole bunch of other things. But says, with a name like Abrams, we won't be seeing him in the chapel choir. These sort of I would call this a kind of a country club anti-Semitism, which I think, or perhaps in this British university anti-Semitism might be the proper way to put it, because the movie, and the movie does this a lot, is from that line, the cut is directly to choir music being sung in the dining hall at the freshman dinner, right? So there's a lot of sort of almost visual and oral puns in the movie in a certain sense. So, but there we get that speech from the head of the college. Of course, you know, as I said, that line won't be seen in the chapel choir. You know, we get those sorts of things throughout. There was some articles written around the time the movie came out about this movie being anti-Semitic, right? And John Gielgud's character was kind of taken to task in particular, you know, and I feel like people miss the point, right? I mean, it's, you know, this is not a movie that condones anti-Semitism in any way, shape, or form, I don't think. But it depicts it as it was, right? You know, it's that this is the sort of thing that you wouldn't be allowed to forget you were a Jew if you wanted to, and that these kinds of comments were the sort of thing that you would either put up with or not put up with. And it's why Abrams' character is saying, I'm going to take them on one at a time, right? And until I can change people's minds about what Jews are and what they're capable of. So, I think it's rather artfully done, right? And you know, we sometimes miss the boat when we jump to that anti-Semitism. You know, in the same way that maybe we shouldn't condemn Huckleberry Finn for the dialect and the use of the N-word. You know, you kind of miss the what the piece of art is actually trying to do. So I've spoken a lot. I want to give you guys a chance. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk so long, but there's a lot to mention about this. I see some hands up.
Mark, go ahead.
Enjoyed it very much, Rabbi. I'm a big fan of this movie. I've seen it multiple times, probably 6, 7 times. And of course, watching the movie 40 years ago before you could just look things up on Wikipedia,
Yeah,
kind of fascinated that, as you mentioned, that the service is not in a synagogue, but it's in a church.
yeah,
And there were articles written, and they mentioned that he converted the Church of England, but they also mentioned, remember, that he was very involved with Jewish youth and athletics
yeah,
throughout his life. So he kept his Jewish identity, even if for social purposes, he converted. And
right.
the other thing I would point out that I heard about at the time that was interesting is there was actually, you mentioned 3 characters, actually 4 characters. There was Aubrey Montague, but also Lord Lindsay, who was based on a real life individual who became a bigwig in the IOC right under Avery Brundage.
Yeah, yeah,
And he's the one who, you know, they show him doing the hurdles with the glasses of, you know,
right.
champagne, don't spill any. But in one of the opening scenes, there is the race around the courtyard to
Yeah.
see if you were under a minute. And so this Lord Lindsay character, who's loosely based on a real person,
Mhm.
steps up to help push him around. And what
Yeah.
I heard at the time is that it wasn't Harold Abrams who did it. It's this other individual who Lord Lindsay is based on.
Yeah,
And he was actually furious because he's the one who actually set that record running around the courtyard. And the movie, they just show him pushing Harold Abrahams to do it.
right.
Well, in the trivia, it says in real life, Lord David Bewley, Lord Lindsay is based on him. He was the first man, but David Putnam was a socialist and did not want to show a lord winning. And there you have it.
And of course, look, I mean, this is where we talk about what's true and what's not true in movies, right?
Yeah.
It's not a good movie if that guy wins and Abrams doesn't.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it changes the whole dynamic, right? The whole point is that Abrams never loses a race until he loses the one to the missionary, right? You know, it's not nearly as effective a movie if these guys are sort of winning and losing, and sometimes they win and sometimes they lose, right? I mean, it's you know, this is where it's all got to be built up to the big finale, right? So it just doesn't work. The movie doesn't work if that guy wins.
Yeah.
And in the movie, of course, it also gives John Gielgud the opportunity to, you know, to say up above. I mean, is that the scene where he says, you know, perhaps they are God's chosen, right, or something like that, you know? So
we have Susan and then Alice.
Talking about his Judaism, I thought it was kind of humorous when he was having dinner in the restaurant with Sybil and just ordered whatever she was going to have. And when it came, it was pork.
yeah, yeah.
And they had a laugh about that, but he laughed about
Show
it.
us whether he ate it or not.
Not right, exactly.
So, you know, my guess is that if such a thing happened to Harold Abrams, he ate it, you know, but the movie doesn't show it. But he's not offended by it, I mean, that much the movie shows us.
Alice.
Yeah. So watching this movie in the context of that the Olympics are now going on, one of the big things that I got out of it was, what are individual athletes, what are they pursuing, and what's pushing them? And, and talking about what pushed Harold and what pushed Eric. And then the flip side of it is, who claims these people? So, Cambridge was not claiming Harold. And then I think when he won, maybe they did claim him.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the country, well, it was interesting, the Prince of Wales was pressuring Eric to run on his Sabbath.
Yeah.
And, I just thought, again, in the context of watching the Olympics now, is all the individual part of it, but then all the politics of it. There was politics back in 1924, and there was politics now.
Right. Yeah. And, some years of the Olympics more than others, right? But there is kind of a watershed moment here in 1924, which is the coach, Sam Musabini, right? I don't know that runners ever appeared in the Olympics again without being coached, right? This sort of idea that sort of comes up here that, to be an amateur is just to be, they make a point of showing you when the guy comes up and says, "I'll run with you," in the thing and with the clock. First he's smoking a cigarette. I mean, that's what it was to be, an amateur, right? You don't eat to be an athlete. You don't quit smoking to be an athlete. You just, the day the race is run, you just go out there and run as fast as you can, right? So the idea of a Sam Musabini, a coach, becomes the norm. You see it. The American team is already doing it. When they come and you see them, then you see their preparations. And again, it's to build them up. These are it's not each other that they really have to beat. It's the Americans they have to beat. Those guys are the fastest in the world, and they're the fastest in the world because they have coaching. And so, the Olympics changes completely once that happens. And not all of that is to the good, as we see. Coaches have exploited athletes. I mean, they've been terrible coaches, right? So it's a very interesting sort of question, but also a very different movie, right? About the rise of coaching in amateur athletics.
Okay,
do wanna make-
Sandy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that movie the first time in Israel at Kibbutz Ha'ogen. And when it was over, everyone in the auditorium stood up and clapped. I mean,
Yeah.
it was really a wonderful experience just being at that. They were so proud of him at
Yeah.
the kibbutz. If you could just explain, I think I know why, but why Sam Musabini didn't come to the race.
Yeah.
If you could explain that, Rabbi.
So I think I can. By the way, Harold Abrams fits very well into the kibbutz world, in a sense, in the non-religious Jewish world, right? I mean, I'm not sure what kibbutz you were on, but I don't think it was a religious kibbutz, right?
No.
Yeah. So, so he fits really well into that, doesn't he? He's, I mean, more than, if he had payas, he wouldn't have fit as well into that. So it's interesting. I mean, as Reformed Jews, I think he fits in. Orthodox rabbis don't like his character so much. I mean, he's dating someone who's not Jewish. Is all that stuff plays into it, right? So it's what we bring to it also. So because it's part of this question of what was an amateur, right? And people lost medals because they were not strictly amateur, like Jim Thorpe, who won medals, I think it was in the 1912, is that right? 1912 Olympics, the decathlon and things like that, eventually had his medals taken away because he had once accepted money to play semi-pro baseball, which of course wasn't even a part of the decathlon, right? But so there was this sort of rule against anything that made you not an amateur, and the coach being paid to coach him is not an amateur, right? And it could ruin his amateur status. So that's why Mr. Musabini has to stay away. Right? At least that's my understanding of it.
Sonnenburns, I'm going to unmute you. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay, just checking. And Zoom user, go ahead. I don't know who that is.
I think it's me.
Oh,
It's
Marilyn.
Marilyn. I really enjoyed the film, and I wanted to say that I thought about the fire that burned within the two runners, the Chariots of Fire. They were the chariot that carried the fire within them, each having their own purpose, each feeling that one running because he ran because it was God who he was trying to connect to, and the other running for the reasons we just discussed. But they each had a fire, a religious fire burning, like a fervor burning within them that created their characters and their desire to be as directed as they were. And it was really intense, even though they were of two different religions, the parallelism as to why they were able to accomplish what they did. And then I couldn't help but think about Greenberg, the Jewish baseball player. Was it Stan Greenberg?
Hank
Greenberg, who
Yeah.
set the precedent for Sandy Koufax when they wouldn't play on Yom Kippur. And so it brought me back to that thought, that there were athletes in Judaism that also had the same realization that it was something that they couldn't do, and how commendable that was. And it made the newspapers and people so proud.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There also are some examples of Jewish baseball players who actually do play on Yom Kippur. So in fact, I've seen some Jewish articles about how there's a curse on those players, that their teams never win the World Series when they actually on Yom Kippur. When you bring up Hank Greenberg, and certainly he dealt with a lot of anti-Semitism as a player as well, including the fact that he was virtually a shoo-in to beat Babe Ruth's single season record of home runs, and pitchers on opposing teams stopped pitching to him. They walked him every time he came to the plate. Now, of course, he was a danger to hit a home run, so it's hard to prove that they did that, but he got up, I think, to 59 when the record was 60, and didn't see another pitch, didn't see another strike for the rest of the season. So, many people understand that to be 58, Mark says. So he got to 58. And then, am I right, Mark? They walked him the rest of the season, right? Almost like whether it was an actual conspiracy or not. Nobody wanted to be the one who gave up the 61st home run to a Jewish player.
Yeah, that was the feeling that, again, you can't prove it, but that they stopped pitching to him. And that was kind of the unspoken reason.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also in the movie, Chariots of Fire, one of my favorite scenes, though, was when Musambini is coaching him on running technique and stuff, and they're watching film. And he explains to him that little's not a threat. He needs to run a longer distance. He's a wild runner. But
Right.
the 100-meter dash is perfect for neurotics like you.
Right. Yeah. And I was going to say that about when you're talking about the religious fire in these two. That's a pretty interesting comparison that's worth thinking about, is that for one of them, the religion gives him comfort. Liddell is sort of knowing that he's running for God, right? That's that's a really powerful comfort to him in a sense. Where when Abrams talks about it, he talks about never being satisfied, right? So you can talk about being neurotic if you like, but it's the sense that no matter what he does, he can't get into the club, you know, and doesn't even know in some ways why he continues to push for it. And I guess I'd argue that in a certain sense, the funeral that frames this movie is the proof that they finally let him into the club, right? You know, that winning the gold medal for England, giving English people something to hope for after the end of World War I. I mean, those kinds of things actually ultimately let him into the club, right? And so the fact that it's in a church actually is important in a sense. And that those people he ran with get up to praise him and talk about him is very important. And then I'd say that the choices that the movie makes to not use scripture from the Christian Bible, but to keep going back, whether it's Chariots of Fire or the words of Isaiah, going back to the Hebrew Bible all through the movie, right, is a very powerful way of saying that giving some acceptance to Harold Abrams' character. And I do want to mention the use of Gilbert and Sullivan as well, where you know, so he falls in love with the girl who's playing an Asian character, right? You know, not a British character. And when one of the first songs you hear him singing is about what is it? He is the you know, and I am an English man, right? Things like so. These things that are you know, Gilbert and Sullivan is all about you know, being quintessentially British and being allowed to come into the club, right? And I think that that's an important message that the movie is playing with. Okay, I think we're at
it's 3 o'clock. I just want to remind everyone that this Sunday is Ben Wolf, son of Rabbi A.J. Wolf, and he's going to discuss his work with the ACLU and how his Judaism affected that work. So I think he's going to be very interesting. And if you need any, you know, help with any other links or something, you know where to find me. And Rabbi, anything else we need to add? Oh, Yolanda.
I could talk about this one for another hour, it feels like, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yolanda Savage, who was head of the URJ's DEI department, will be speaking virtually on Friday night. So be sure to tune in. We are in person if you want to come to services on Friday night, and Torah study, all that's still going on.
Great. Thank you all. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thanks, Rabbi. It was a great review.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.